What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing Ravens content every single day. If you want to see the daily Ravens content, make sure the subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I upload a brand new video. Now, in this video today, I'm going to be talking about news that dropped very recently about Lamar Jackson and contract negotiations, discussions with the Baltimore Ravens and Eric DeCosta. Now, the source for this is Michael Lombardi. So again, not Rappaport, not Adam Schefter, but an NFL reporter, not somebody that, I would take, 100% guaranteed fact, but also not somebody that I think is a bad reporter. I think Michael Lombardi generally is pretty good. So, I do believe in this source, typically, obviously, can't say 100%, but I want to talk about it because I think it's interesting to bring up. Now, what he said was, I was told reliably by somebody who was involved that Lamar Jackson told the Ravens in a conversation, get Hopkins and Beckham, and then we can talk. Then the Ravens basically said, we can't get Hopkins and Beckham. We just can't get both. We can't afford both, but we'll get one of them. So let's talk about it. Lamar Jackson wants DeAndre Hopkins and Odell Beckham Jr. And again, why do I trust this source? Because it makes sense. All right. If you're looking at it and you're a quarterback, you would want this. You would want these players. And I think this is something that is Lamar Jackson saying, you know what? Treat me right, and then we can kind of talk. Because you haven't been getting me the guys. I keep hearing in the offseason about all these great free agent wide receivers, and we keep not signing any. Can we please get somebody? And then we can talk. And Lamar obviously wants to because there's two really good players available. Mike Evans is another player that's available. But DeAndre Hopkins currently is the top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I think he's closer to top 5. Like I would, in a heartbeat right now, not saying looking forward to the future or anything like that, I would have DeAndre Hopkins before I have A.J. Brown. And I think A.J. Brown is a top 8 wide receiver in the NFL. Like I have DeAndre Hopkins top 7. I think he's very close. He jumps back and forth with Jamar Chase in my top 5. That's how good I still think he is. And last year he wasn't injured. He was serving a suspension. That's why he missed games. So it's not an injury-prone issue with him. He is still dominant on the field. And obviously Odell Beckham Jr., I've talked about him so many times. But with Lamar Jackson saying this, I think it's a good sign. I think it's a good sign with what the Ravens have done is because it's a gesture of good faith. It's a gesture of goodwill that they are trying to do right by him. They are trying to build around him. They are trying to help him succeed. They fired Roman, and they went out and got the best free agent wide receiver on the market. That is crucial. Now, they can't get both, and that's true. Now, obviously, it's not 100% true. It's possible. Very difficult. It would be very difficult for them to get both. The hope would be, here's how they can get both, just so people, understand. There's two ways. Either they trade for him and the Cardinals completely tank the cap, which wouldn't make much sense because the reason why they'd be getting rid of him is to save a little bit of cap space, but that's besides the point. And you would have to trade a lot because they were to be taking the cap. I mean, that would be a high pick. If you wanted to get DeAndre Hopkins with his current salary, you could probably trade. I mean, honestly, I think a 5th-round pick would trade for DeAndre Hopkins. Not because he's worth a 5th-round pick, but because I think they're going to cut him. And if they can get something for him, that's going to be very nice for them because they won't have the dead cap. And they will be able to at least acquire a pick, not have the dead cap, and it'll work out pretty well for him. But for the Ravens, I think the best option would be they cut him and then they agree to a deal with DeAndre Hopkins. And I don't think DeAndre Hopkins would take a deal like Odell Beckham Jr.'s. I think he would be looking for a multi-year contract because, he's around 30 years old, but he's been playing. Odell Beckham Jr. hasn't been playing. And I think DeAndre Hopkins could be a guy to potentially talk about. And Darius Slay, if you guys didn't know, talked about how there's some guys that, want to be working their way to Baltimore. Some people have speculated that maybe that's DeAndre Hopkins, and the reason because of that is, based on who Darius Slay follows in terms of players that may be moving, and the kind of the two players that people saw the most correlation was Mike Evans and DeAndre Hopkins. Again, it could be somebody totally random, but Darius Slay, again, remember, agree to a contract with the Ravens. Like, he was definitely told, hey, this is who we're we're going to try and bring in these guys as well. And he also, is well connected in the league. Why? Because he's a popular veteran that is very good at football. So in terms of getting DeAndre Hopkins and Odell, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it is possible if the Ravens sign him to a contract. If he gets cut, unlikely, because a lot of teams would go after him. People would be able to offer bigger contracts than Baltimore. The demand the demand is something that Lamar not having an agent, this is that type of demand. Not saying it's bad. Again, every time I talk about Lamar not having an agent, I have to preface it by saying it's not a bad thing. But an agent would maybe just say one of them. But Odell, just say get me one of them, and then we can kind of talk. But I think this bodes well for the Ravens in negotiations. And we talked about it, when the Ravens signed Odell, was like, hey, we got him. This is going to be helpful in those negotiations because, look, Lamar was recruiting him. He wanted him to be there. Now we can try and keep him. But again, I don't expect that the Ravens do sign Lamar Jackson prior to the draft. And why do I think that? Is because maybe they go out and draft a first-round wide receiver instead of going after a guy like Hopkins. Again, my belief is the Ravens shouldn't go wide receiver in the first round. However, I think based on this and kind of what Lamar is asking for, first-round wide receiver would not be a bad substitute for a DeAndre Hopkins. And I guarantee the Ravens have asked him, what wide receivers do you like? And honestly, if I'm looking at it and the way that Lamar Jackson wants to play, I think he probably wants somebody as a wide receiver that's been winning. And I think, you look at, there were 3 guys in the top 6 at the end of the year. I would say 3 of the top 5 teams in college football last year had a first-round wide receiver. Ohio State had Jackson Smith and Jigba. TCU had Quentin Johnston. And USC, who I think was the 5th best team in college football last year, they had Mr. Jordan Addison. Now, I think Zay Flowers kind of reminds me of Hollywood Brown in terms of size and being smaller, and I think he's a good player. I'm not trying to, disrespect him, but I think Lamar Jackson would want one of those guys. And I feel like if we're looking at DeAndre Hopkins and body type, that's Quentin Johnston. Again, not in terms of play style, pretty different players, but Quentin Johnston is a physical specimen like DeAndre Hopkins, very athletic, very big type of player. I wonder, and I don't necessarily think this would be bad, but I think the best way would be drafting Quentin Johnston. And when I say the best way, I think the best way to get this Hopkins and Beckham, because we can't get Hopkins, but they probably told him, we can get you a first-round wide receiver. And Quentin Johnston, I fully expect to be there. And I like him. I've come around it now that we have Odell. I like Quentin Johnston because he wouldn't have to step in and be a 1 or be a 2 or anything like that. He could just be used as a background, gadget guy to start his career and develop into that number 1. So again, I'm all for it. But that's kind of my interpretation of how the Ravens can deal with that situation based on the leaks. My thoughts on it, what I think it could mean, how the Ravens can adapt and react, because they can't get exactly what they want. But I think Johnston and Odell would be the closest that they could get to what Lamar Jackson is asking within reason. Let me know in the comment section down below your guys' thoughts I know I'm not a huge Quentin Johnson fan. I've come around on the idea of Quentin Johnson. I don't think he's, a number one, step in and just dominate like a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, or even Devontae Smith type of way. He's a developmental guy. But maybe that's something Lamar Jackson kind of wants, just in terms of body types and stuff like that. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for daily Ravens content, and I'll see all of you again tomorrow.